The shattered peace. The universe had known peace for 3,000 years before humanity joined the Galactic Alliance. That peace lasted exactly 47 more years, until the day Haven Prime burned. Marcus Rivera stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic station orbiting Kepler 442b, watching the sunset paint the alien sky in shades of purple and gold. As Earth's youngest ambassador to the Galactic Alliance at 34, he had spent the last 5 years building bridges between humanity and the older species. The Alliance had welcomed Earth with open arms, impressed by humanity's rapid technological advancement and their seemingly infinite capacity for adaptation. What they didn't know, what Marcus himself had almost forgotten, was that adaptation had been forged in the crucible of 10,000 years of warfare. The Thorians, with their crystalline bodies and harmonious society, spoke of humans as refreshingly creative. The Zelanti, ancient beyond measure, found human art and music fascinating. Even the militaristic Draconids respected humanity's discipline, though they considered humans physically weak and emotionally volatile. None of them understood that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their creativity or discipline, it was their ability to become monsters when their loved ones were threatened. The emergency beacon shattered the peaceful evening like a hammer through glass. Marcus rushed to the communication center, his heart already sinking as he recognized the signature. Haven Prime, humanity's first and most successful colony outside the solar system, home to 15 million souls who had traveled across the stars to build new lives. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Admiral Catherine Walsh, her usually composed face drawn with tension. "Ambassador Rivera, we have a situation. 3 hours ago, an unknown fleet appeared at the edge of Haven Prime's system. They're not responding to any communication attempts and they're moving directly toward the planet." Marcus felt his blood run cold. In 47 years of membership in the Galactic Alliance, humanity had never faced a military threat. The Alliance's peace was supposed to be inviolable, maintained by ancient treaties and the combined might of 100 species. "Who are they, pirates? Rogue faction?" Admiral Walsh's expression darkened further. "They call themselves the Korthax Empire. According to our Thorian contacts, they're from beyond Alliance space. They've been expanding for centuries, absorbing or destroying everything in their path. The Alliance has been aware of them but believed they were still decades away from our borders." The main view screen suddenly erupted with activity as a massive ship, easily 3 times the size of humanity's largest battlecruiser, materialized from hyperspace. Its hull was a writhing mass of organic-looking metal, pulsing with veins of crimson energy. More ships followed, dozens, then hundreds, each one a testament to a technology that seemed to blend machinery with something disturbingly alive. A transmission cut through all channels, and Marcus found himself face to face with something that made his primitive brain scream danger. The Korthax commander was vaguely humanoid, but its features were wrong in every way that mattered. Too many joints in its arms, skin that shifted between scales and something like liquid metal, and eyes that held an intelligence utterly devoid of empathy. "Inhabitants of Haven Prime," it spoke, its voice a harmony of discord that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the fear centers of the brain. "You have been selected for incorporation into the Korthax Empire. Your biological and technological distinctiveness will be added to our own. Resistance will result in your termination. You have 1 planetary rotation to prepare for integration." The transmission ended as abruptly as it began. Marcus immediately opened a channel to Haven Prime's governor, Elena Matsumoto, a former Japanese naval officer who had led the colony for 8 years. Her face appeared on screen, calm despite the situation. "Ambassador, I assume you saw that. Elena, you need to evacuate immediately. Get as many people off planet as possible." She smiled, a sad expression that Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. "With what ships, Marcus?" "We have maybe enough transport capacity for 100,000 people if we're lucky. I won't choose who lives and who dies. We're implementing Protocol 7. Protocol 7. Marcus had read about it once, buried deep in humanity's colonial charter. The Last Stand Protocol, when evacuation was impossible and surrender meant something worse than death. It meant that Haven Prime would fight to the last person, buying time with their lives for Earth to prepare. "Elena, please, there has to be another way." "There isn't, and you know it." "Marcus, listen to me. The Korthax made a mistake. They think we're like the other Alliance species, civilized, rational. They don't know what we really are." What we become when cornered. Make them remember why humanity spent so long trying to forget. The connection ended. Marcus watched helplessly as Haven Prime's defensive satellites, pathetic compared to the Korthax fleet, powered up. Mining ships were already moving. Not away from the planet but toward it, their holds filled with industrial explosives. The colony's 3 military vessels, ancient by galactic standards, formed up in a defensive line that everyone knew was meaningless. 23 hours later, the Korthax moved. Their weapons were beyond anything humanity had encountered, beams of energy that didn't just destroy but seemed to unmake matter at a fundamental level. Haven Prime's defenses lasted exactly 17 minutes. The mining ships that tried to ram the enemy vessels were swatted aside like insects. The military ships died firing every weapon they had, their crews singing ancient war songs from Earth's blood-stained history. Then came the bombardment. Marcus watched through tears as the cities he had helped design were reduced to atoms, schools where human children had learned alongside alien playmates, hospitals that had pioneered interspecies medicine, parks where families had picnicked under an alien sun. All of it turned to ash and memory in the span of 6 hours. The Korthax commander appeared on screen one more time, addressing not just the surviving humans, but broadcasting across the entire alliance. Let this serve as a lesson to all who would resist the Korthax Empire. We are inevitable, we are evolution, and we are coming. What happened next would be remembered in galactic history as the moment everything changed. Earth went silent, not the silence of shock or defeat, but the terrifying quiet that comes before a storm. Every human ship in Alliance space began moving, not in panic but with purpose. Mining vessels stopped their operations mid-asteroid. Cargo haulers dumped their loads and changed course. Research ships abandoned decade-long missions. They were all heading home. Marcus received a single message from Earth's president, Amara Okonkwo, a woman who had dedicated her life to peace. Her words were simple. Ambassador Rivera, your diplomatic mission is suspended. Return to Earth immediately. Inform the Alliance that humanity withdraws from all peace treaties effective immediately. We are now at war. The Thorian ambassador, Crystalline Harmonics of Dawn, approached Marcus as he prepared to leave. Its translucent form pulsed with confused colors. Ambassador Rivera, surely Earth doesn't intend to fight the Korthax alone. The Alliance Council is meeting to discuss a measured response. Marcus turned to face the alien he had called friend for 5 years. The Alliance can discuss all at once. But you need to understand something about humans. We spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. We got so good at it that we scared ourselves into peace. The Korthax just gave us permission to remember what we really are. What are you? Marcus's smile was cold enough to make the Thorian step back. We're the species that split atoms to win wars. We're the people who invented chemical weapons, biological warfare, and weapons that could crack continents. We tried to forget to be better. But the Korthax just murdered 15 million of our children. They're about to learn why humanity's first rule of warfare has always been, never fight a human who has nothing left to lose. The fury unleashed 6 months after Haven Prime fell. The Korthax Empire received their first taste of human fury. They had expected negotiations, perhaps a few skirmishes as Earth tested their defenses. They had not expected Operation Ragnarok. Captain David Okoye stood on the bridge of the ESS Vengeance, a ship that 6 months ago had been a cargo hauler named Lucky Star. Now, its hull bristled with weapons salvaged, stolen, and invented in humanity's darkest hours. Around him, 300 similar vessels waited in the darkness between stars. They weren't pretty ships. They weren't even particularly advanced ships. But they were crewed by humans who had watched 15 million of their own die. And that made them the most dangerous fleet in the galaxy. All ships. This is Admiral Chen. The communication system crackled. You know what we're here to do? The Korthax have a supply depot in this system, supporting their expansion into Alliance space. Intelligence suggests minimal defense, maybe 50 ships. They think they're safe because no Alliance species has ever conducted a deep strike operation. They're about to learn different. Remember Haven Prime, no mercy, no hesitation. We are humanity's fury made manifest. The attack began not with the massive energy weapons the Korthax favored, but with something far simpler and more terrifying. Humanity had spent the 6 months not just building ships but studying their enemy. The Korthax's biomechanical technology was impressive, but it had a weakness. It required a specific type of energy, to maintain the connection between organic and mechanical components. Disrupt that energy, and their ships didn't just stop working. They died screaming. Dr. Sarah Kim, who had lost her daughter on Haven Prime, had worked 20-hour days to develop what she called the Screamer Bomb. It was crude, it was cruel, and it was devastatingly effective. The first wave of human ships didn't even try to engage in traditional combat. They simply flew straight at the Korthax fleet, each one carrying a Screamer Bomb in place of escape pods. When the Intrepid, commanded by Captain Jose Martinez, reached optimal range, he broadcast a single message on all frequencies: "This is for the children of Haven Prime." Then he detonated his screamer. The effect was instantaneous and horrifying. Every Korthax ship within 1,000 kilometers began to convulse. Their organic components, suddenly severed from their mechanical symbiotes, died in agony. The mechanical parts, programmed to preserve the organic at all costs, tore themselves apart trying to reconnect. Within minutes, 50 Korthax vessels had been reduced to drifting hulks of twisted metal and rotting flesh. The Korthax commander who had destroyed Haven Prime, Supreme Harvester Zek Theta, watched the destruction from his flagship at the edge of the system. For the first time in his 300-year existence, he felt something his species had bred out of themselves eons ago. Fear. Impossible, he transmitted to his remaining fleet. These primitives couldn't have developed such weapons in mere months. His tactical officer, a younger Korthax whose biological components were still adapting to their mechanical frame, disagreed. Supreme Harvester, their technology is crude, but their application is innovative. They're not trying to match us. They're trying to hurt us. That was when the second wave hit. These weren't converted cargo ships, but Earth's actual warships, held in reserve while the converted vessels drew the Korthax's attention. They came in fast and hard, using tactics that no civilized species would consider. When the ESS Thunder's weapons were disabled, Captain Rebecca Thompson ordered her crew to overload the fusion reactor and rammed the nearest Korthax cruiser. Both ships vanished in a miniature sun that took 3 more enemy vessels with them. The battle for System K447, as it would be known in history books, lasted 8 hours. When it ended, the Korthax had lost their supply depot, 80 ships, and something far more valuable: their assumption of superiority. The humans had lost 200 ships and 40,000 lives. By any mathematical standard, it was a Pyrrhic victory at best. But mathematics didn't account for human psychology. The volunteers kept coming. Not soldiers, not trained military personnel, but teachers, doctors, engineers, artists, parents, children, barely old enough to hold a weapon. They came by the millions, each one willing to die if it meant taking a Korthax with them. On Earth, the entire planet had transformed into a war machine that would have terrified humanity's ancestors. The old factories that had once produced cars now churned out weapons. Hospitals became military training centers. Schools taught children not just mathematics and literature, but tactics and xenobiology focused on Korthax weaknesses. President Okonkwo, the woman who had dedicated her life to peace, now stood before the United Nations of Earth with eyes that had seen too much. "They took our children," she said simply. "They took our future. So we will take everything from them, not because we want to, but because we must. Because if we don't, Haven Prime won't be the last human world to burn." The Korthax, for their part, couldn't understand what was happening. They had conquered hundreds of species, each one eventually accepting their fate or being destroyed. But humans didn't accept. When a human colony was attacked, instead of surrendering, the colonists would destroy their own infrastructure, rather than let it fall into enemy hands. When human ships were cornered, they would self-destruct, taking as many Korthax with them as possible. Supreme Harvester Zek Theta called for reinforcements from the Empire's core worlds. "The humans are insane," he reported to the Korthax overmind. "They don't fight to win. They fight to hurt us. They throw their lives away for tactical advantages that any rational species would consider meaningless." The overmind's response was cold and calculating. "Then we will exterminate them completely. No incorporation. No harvesting. Complete annihilation." That decision would prove to be the Korthax Empire's greatest mistake. When word reached Earth that the Korthax intended total genocide, something changed in humanity's collective psyche. The fury that had driven them was joined by something colder, more calculating. If humanity was going to die, they would make sure the Korthax remembered them forever. Operation Götterdämmerung was conceived by a think tank of humanity's most brilliant and most traumatized minds. Led by Professor Alan Turing III, whose entire family had been on Haven Prime, they developed something that violated every treaty humanity had ever signed, every moral boundary they had set for themselves. They created the Omega weapon. It wasn't a bomb or a beam or even a conventional weapon at all. It was a virus, but not a biological one. It was designed to infect the Corthax's biomechanical interface, the very thing that made them what they were. But instead of simply disrupting it like the Screamer bombs, the Omega weapon would turn it against itself, making the mechanical components treat the biological as a foreign invader to be destroyed. The delivery method was even more horrifying in its simplicity. Volunteers, knowing they would die in agony, allowed themselves to be captured by the Corthax. Hidden in their bodies were microscopic transmitters containing the Omega weapons code. When the Corthax tried to incorporate them into their collective, the virus spread. The first sign something was wrong came when a Corthax dreadnought suddenly stopped responding to commands. Then another. Then dozens. The Supreme Harvester watched in horror as his own hand, the perfect fusion of flesh and metal he had cultivated for centuries, began to tear itself apart. "What have you done?" he screamed across all frequencies as his flagship systems turned on themselves. Admiral Chen, leading humanity's final assault, responded with words that would echo through galactic history. "We showed you what happens when you make humanity remember how to hate. You took our future, so we're taking yours. But unlike you, we're giving you a choice. Surrender now, leave Alliance space forever, and we'll give you the cure. Continue fighting, and your entire species dies with you." The Corthax Empire, which had never known defeat, which had consumed civilizations for millennia, faced extinction at the hands of a species that had been spacefaring for less than a century. The choice in the end was simple. The surrender was broadcast across the galaxy. The mighty Corthax Empire, brought to its knees not by superior technology or greater numbers, but by the pure, distilled fury of a species that had turned its own self-destructive tendencies into a weapon. The aftermath changed everything. The Galactic Alliance, which had watched in horrified fascination as humanity nearly destroyed itself to defeat the Corthax, unanimously voted to create a new decree. Never again would any species be allowed to threaten human colonies. Not because they loved humanity, but because they feared what humanity would become if pushed too far again. Ambassador Marcus Rivera, recalled from retirement to help negotiate the peace, stood in the rebuilt city of New Haven on a different world, watching human children play with alien friends. The fury was locked away again, hopefully forever. But the galaxy would never forget the lesson. Humanity's greatest weakness, their capacity for violence, was also their most terrifying strength. And in the deepest vaults of Earth, sealed behind warnings in every language known to the galaxy, the Omega weapon waited, a reminder that humanity's fury, once unleashed, could never be fully contained again.